So that's what Bitcoin means to me, right? It is a rational foundation for economics for the human race. I think the answer is we should live peacefully together with the status quo. And every time a strong-willed leader comes along and says, God told me that the status quo will result in all of us plunging to hell and the end of the earth, and therefore I have to murder 25% of the population. It's like the Catholics versus the Huguenots in France. Like they started a war, ran for like 35 or 40 years with the Catholics murdering the Huguenots and the Huguenots murdering the Catholics. It wasn't good for France. And eventually the leaders that we liked better were the leaders that, after the Edict of Nantes said, okay, well, Calvinists and Huguenots and Catholics are both allowed to live in the country without us murdering each other. So if I look forward, I don't have a lot of patience, or I don't have a lot of sympathy for a developer that thinks we should have a civil war and destroy the property rights, economically murder the miners, or economically murder an application developer, or economically murder a Bitcoin holder just because they think God told them that the world would be better if they got their way. It's desirable property, it's Bitcoin, and maybe it's like unregulated digital monopolies, the Magnificent Seven. But even then, your time horizon on that stuff is 10 years, it's not 100 years. I can show you people that will say, I own some New York real estate that I hope to hold for 100 years. I can find property people that would say, yeah, I got a 100-year life on that. Like if I offered you all the mineral rights for the entire state of Pennsylvania, might you keep it in the family for a few hundred years? If I offered you the middle of Tokyo or the middle of London, might you keep it in the family for 300 years? Yeah, maybe, if you could afford to pay the taxes. So I think that this hodler dynamic is important, but really it's indicative of the fact that Bitcoin is money. And it's a very simple acid test. Look at every crypto billionaire that holds something other than Bitcoin, and then check to see whether they bought 100 million more worth of that stuff. And when you find one, you might pay attention, but I haven't seen one, right? I don't think you're going to see it, because everything else is really a commodity losing value over time. Bitcoin is the money gaining value over time. Here's a different way to see the world. There's 8 billion people in the world. There's millions and millions of corporations. There's thousands and thousands of material governments. There's tens of thousands of applications. There's thousands of ideologies. And Bitcoin's a solution for everybody. And one day everyone's going to use this. And so if you see a network with millions of companies and billions of users and hundreds of countries and thousands of municipalities and governments, right? And hundreds of religions and ideologies, then you have to, and cultures, you have to allow that there's going to be a great diversity in the way that Bitcoin is used. So I think that, when you're considering, the network, the future of the network, you got to consider the impact of this on all political constituencies. Not all hodlers are equal, right? Someone that's holding $1 billion of Bitcoin will probably hire 20 lawyers and go litigate over, the issue of, is somebody Satoshi or not, right? Or Bitcoin positive things, whereas someone that has $100 of Bitcoin can't afford to hire the lawyers, and they're not going to litigate, and and so they're not going to have the same amount of influence. Not all developers are equal. The developers that work for Coinbase can decide to put Lightning into Coinbase or not, right? The developers at Binance, the developers at Cash App, right? They have more influence, to adopt certain, protocol adjustments and do things at layer two, et cetera, introduce the universal, monetary, codes, et cetera. So you have to consider that. And I think that the political system of the future, you're going to have Bitcoin energy companies that provide electricity to power Bitcoin miners. They have an influence. You have Bitcoin banks, that is corporations that are moving layer 1 and layer 2 and layer 3 Bitcoin around high frequency, like Coinbase, like Cash App, like Fidelity. You're going to have Bitcoin devices, like the signing apps, the cold cards, right? The BitKeys of the world, the ledgers of the world. You're going to have applications. We should be the same way, a doctor would be. You've got a beautiful child, they're healthy. You don't want the doctor doing elective surgeries on them to make them just 1% better by cutting them open. Because human biases, we always overestimate the benefit we'll bring, and we always underestimate the unintended consequences. And at some point, you've got some kind of medical cure that's 99.9% effective against a hypothetical problem that happens 1 in a million times, and you mandate it to 1 million people. And what happens is you save one person, you kill 999 innocent people, and you waste the time of the other 1 million people. And that's what happens with, excessive, enthusiastic intervention in a healthy economy or a healthy organic ecosystem. So I think we should just be very, very thoughtful, and we should try to channel energy cheerfully and constructively at either building functionality in the layers above the base layer, because there's lots of stuff to be built. Go get Apple and Google to build Bitcoin into their products. Get Microsoft to build Bitcoin in their products. Build something to compete with them. I could give you 100,000 ideas of something to do. Every company on earth could basically flip their treasury to Bitcoin. Get every single company, millions of them, to convert to the Bitcoin standard, right? So that you can rework everything under the sun. There's a lot of stuff to do that's constructive, that expands the ecosystem, that will improve our odds of success and improve the rate of adoption without putting the base layer at risk. And so I'd say focus upon that. Code is a liability, not an asset. Just like laws are a liability, not an asset, right? The president of Argentina is looking to repeal 380,000 different rules, right? So complexity in the protocol creates new attack surfaces. Every time you introduce a new piece of code, it's an attack surface. It's something to break. Given the fact that we're already winning and we're on a path to winning, and this is where you're an optimist or you're a pessimist. For example, do you think the universe is going to work with or without human beings? If the universe is going to go on for another 1 billion years, then who needs you to F with the laws of physics? Right? It's going to work fine without you, right? So you have your little God complex, but probably you'll be wrong, the universe will be right. So if you actually have some respect for natural law, and if you have respect for Bitcoin the network, if you think it's already working, then every piece of complexity introduces a way for it to break. Every complexity is a new failure mode, a new attack surface, a new maintenance obligation. I created a new piece of code. Okay, well, now we have to test it against every other piece of code every time we update any piece of the software. Okay, so 100,000 different permutations of things to worry about testing, and if one of them breaks, we're doomed. And on the other hand, what's the usefulness of the new feature, right? That a new feature encourages feature competition. So every time you add a new feature, you encourage someone else to propose their feature. And then you create confusion. It's like, okay, well, there's a new feature, so now everybody in the world has to figure out how that affects everything that they've done or everything they're going to do. And that creates an arms race or a feature race, and that creates uncertainty, and that undermines trust. And ultimately, all of the confusion, uncertainty, and undermining of the trust undermines the efficiency of everybody else in the ecosystem. So don't build things that would potentially impair, destroy, or change the nature of a Bitcoin between now and 10,000 years from now, once you're dead and once your company's dead, right? Once you're gone, don't mess with the network, right? leave the fundamentals alone. And it's kind of simple. It's like when a dude comes to a Manhattan and the guy says, hey, I have this idea, I'm going to set off a thermonuclear warhead, but it's only going to go off for 20 blocks in every direction and I own the blocks. Don't you think you're just like, hey, just stop it? Like, you don't need to be messing with that, right? We don't need that kind of behavior. So I don't care how smart you are, right? You just don't need to be messing with the quiet enjoyment of everybody else in the city. Like, just leave the 21 million blocks alone. And again, it's like the moral hazard is if you encourage people to do this, then you'll have 10,000 people lined up to do it. Then you're going to have 10,000 companies that will basically invest $1 million each to try to change the protocol. Okay, and now you're just going to have war, right? And that is the same as the market logic of Austrian economics. It's like, let the market decide. Let the people do what they're going to do. Don't attempt to tell everyone in the universe how to behave, right? Leave them alone. So I say, leave Bitcoin alone. It's a living, organic life form. Just leave it alone, right? You happen to think that the world could benefit from X? Do it yourself on your own application. Risk your own capital. If you want to introduce a protocol and give it to the world, that's fine. You can introduce any number of open protocols. Linux is open protocol. HTTP is open protocol. You can have your own Lightning protocol, create a competing Lightning protocol. You can do all those things, but ultimately respect nature, right? And respect the fact that Satoshi managed to engineer this genetic life form. Satoshi created a crypto life form, released it into cyberspace, and it lived. And everybody before created something and it died. And so after hundreds and hundreds of experiments, they all died, and millions of things that died after it. Here's the one thing that lived, and we should be in awe that thing lived. And we should, our job is to help people adopt it, help it grow and succeed. But you're about as likely to improve the genetic code of Bitcoin as you are to improve the genetic code of a cockroach or a virus or a rabbit. It's leave the things and let them reach their full potential. Cryptocurrency has saddled the entire industry with so much baggage, because if you believe that Bitcoin is a digital currency, you immediately put yourself in opposition to nation states, banks, political currencies, governments, laws, etc., and you're by necessity a rebel. Because to be able to use Bitcoin as a currency, you have to actively break laws or topple regimes, and that's a very combative view of the world. If you actually conceptualize Bitcoin as property, or money, if money is collateral that backs the currency, then you actually have a very peaceful resolution to this problem. I'm going to hold my money as a store of wealth, and Bitcoin competes with property or gold as a store of wealth, or it competes with stock portfolios as a store of wealth. And I'm going to make that my savings account or my savings portfolio. And then my checking account, my medium of exchange, is going to be the currency dictated by the regime where I live, whether it's Venezuela or Argentina or the US or China or whatever. New York City real estate or London real estate or Palm Beach real estate, luxury real estate, is money. Because if you look at wealthy people, they're not selling. There's no one bragging about how they sold all their nice places in Palm Beach, New York, and London. They're buying more, right? If you've ever met a rich family that has real estate holdings, they don't sit around saying, yeah, we're going to diversify and we're going to sell next year. We're going to get rid of the entire portfolio at a huge profit over 10 years. What they say is, I'm looking forward to the next deal where we're going to acquire this building. or we're going to buy this other thing, right? They buy and they hold. And they typically buy and hold to give to their children's children. Right? The same is true with art. If it's good art, collectors, Frick, Andrew Mellon, they didn't buy art to flip the art, right? They're not speculators. I bought a Picasso so I could sell the Picasso, right? They wanted to buy them all. That's why they call them collectors. So if something is deemed to be really valuable, you bought $1 billion of it, and your goal is to buy another $1 billion of it. And so if you think about all these things, which thing in the crypto ecosystem is that? Right? Bitcoin is that, right? I bought a bunch of Bitcoin. My goal is to buy more Bitcoin, right? It's just a very simple acid test. Do you have an exit strategy, or is that the exit strategy? Andrew Mellon's exit strategy was, I'm going to buy all the great art I can get my hands on. I'm going to build a beautiful building in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to endow the National Gallery with the art as a gift to the people of the country. That was the exit strategy. And you get the idea. It wasn't a speculation. And so Bitcoin is the one thing that qualifies as money because it's going to appreciate in value over time. The world's full of investments that are speculations or trades. Commodities, of course, are not money. Every single commodity other than Bitcoin is going to lose value over time, starting with gold, but certainly silver, soybeans, oil, natural gas. You can't really invest in them. You can invest in property. You could buy like all the mineral rights for 10,000 acres. That might be an investment that might go up in value, maybe. And that means that you're going to see so many different implementations of Bitcoin. You'll see as many implementations of Bitcoin as like you will see books written in English, right? They're all written in English, but they don't all say the same thing, right? Somebody writes Communist Manifesto in English, and somebody writes In Defense of Capitalism in English, and they both used English. And it was beneficial to both of them to use English. And that's why we don't want to be censors. It's like, oh, I heard that some people in a place I don't like are using my language. The truth is, it's beneficial to, say, the Western world when our enemies use English. It's beneficial to America when our enemies use dollars. It's beneficial to the human race when your enemy uses mathematics. Right? It's beneficial to everybody in the Bitcoin ecosystem when everybody uses Bitcoin, whether they're your enemy or your friend. And you'll see crippled implementations, but they won't all be crippled. And the most important point is that the layer 2s can fail, the layer 3s can fail, the layer 4s can fail. The ecosystem has to survive. We have to basically make Bitcoin successful. Even I may not be successful, my company may not be successful, my ideology may not be successful, but the world is a better place that Bitcoin is successful. So oftentimes I see a lot of people in the community and they kind of get this thing turned on its head. Like they feel like they have to topple a government or attack a politician or attack a policy in order for Bitcoin to succeed. But the truth is, they could just say Bitcoin's good. The likelihood that you're going to win the other 100 debates, 0. The other 100 debates will continue. And all you're going to do is make 100 different sets of enemies. And on the other hand, you could just say Bitcoin is like the universal money to benefit everybody, the individual, the family, the small company, the mid-sized company, the big company, the regulated company, the monopoly, the city, the state, the country, the good countries, the bad countries, the good religions, the bad religions, the good people, the bad people, the everybody. We prefer natural law over human law. We prefer physical sciences over computer sciences, and a choice to favor the universe over the metaverse. It's like Elon Musk joked, he said, like the laws of physics, are non-negotiable, right? Whereas the laws of man are suggestions. And Bitcoin is really that submission to natural law. There's a humility to it. And if we look at Austrian economics, if we look at capitalism, if we look at liberty and freedom, and most of the more positive ideologies in the world, they're all rooted in natural law and natural rights. And when you start to try to superimpose artificiality or artificial edicts, it's like humans will come up with 100,000 laws that say you can't bake bread and you have to go to sleep at a certain time, and you can't think this and you can't say that. And these things get taken to the extreme, and what they do is they destroy the society. It's just too artificial. And in computer science, one of the things about Bitcoin is it's not a big code base, right? Satoshi didn't set out to impress people by writing as much code as possible. The whole idea was to make it the minimum amount of code. I mean, the real goal of great design, right, is the least. Do you see that little video that circulates on YouTube where it shows the guy with the tin can and has got 6 different templates, and he's got 8 different types of blocks, and he's got a triangle block, and he shows it goes into the square hole, and he's got a circular block and it goes in the square hole, and he's got a rectangular block that goes in the square hole. And what he shows is people oftentimes they overthink and they overdesign. And you can choose, when your Bitcoin's worth 10 million of Bitcoin, you can set up your own citadel and your own township and live the way you want and engineer your own rocket ship and go to your own planet, and set up the government the way you want to set it up. But first get the money, right? First thing, if you look at how progress takes place in civilization, it takes place because you have economic actors with the economic power to do something. And I could give you hundreds of examples in history, but generally, whenever you see a revolution that was to the benefit of the people, it wasn't the poor plebs that did it. It was a wealthy person that actually supported the plebs. And the result was benefit to everybody, but there was always an economic actor involved to support it. So I think when you look at all these things, you wouldn't want to have a protocol change to discourage anybody from joining the network. And you kind of don't want to pick battles unnecessarily that you don't need to pick. Like maybe you hate banks. Maybe you think everybody should be their own bank, but if Warren Buffett and Charlie, Munger had decided, Berkshire Hathaway bought $30 billion worth of Apple stock and it became worth $150 billion, and they made $120 billion on the trade. And that was more profitable than everything Berkshire Hathaway did in the entire history of the company. And that was a decision made by someone that worked for Warren Buffett. And so when they decide to buy $30 billion of Bitcoin, and you don't really like big corporations, and when they custody it with JP Morgan, when Warren Buffett says to JP Morgan, I want $30 billion of Bitcoin, I want you to hold it, Jamie Dimon would say, okay, well, I guess maybe it isn't just for criminals because Warren Buffett wants it or Bill Gates wants it. And then he picks up the phone and calls someone at his bank, and they decide to open up a custody operation. And then the price of Bitcoin triples. And, you'll be sitting there saying, damn it, the stupid Berkshire Hathaway people, they just made $100 billion in 3 months. It doesn't seem fair. But on the other hand, everybody else in the Bitcoin ecosystem will make trillions and trillions of dollars at the same time. So that's what Bitcoin means to me, right? It is a rational foundation for economics for the human race.